who should be successful, but what? They're not successful. Why?
So that's his why buy. But what is he afraid of?
My personal style of education, but still entertain them, bring them along with stories, right?
Who do we want to learn from? People who are what? Killing it. If you're a real man, what do you do? I'm not the only one.
You can't wait to tell your spouse. You can't wait to tell your colleague. You can't wait to go to work and tell somebody. And you're like, oh my God, I can't wait. So what happened?
If you haven't seen my TV show, you should get cable. That's what you need to do.
From doing a TV show to doing corporate events, I've been so lucky to connect with many passionate entrepreneurs worldwide.
What I've learned from a business perspective.
Because this is the formula for success, no matter who you talk to. Attitude will drive your behavior. Would you agree? And your behavior will drive your consequences every single time.
All right, we got the concept. Okay, we got the concept. We got the equipment, right? We got the brand. You guys got that. And then again, we got the content that we create. That's the easy part. This is the big one, the big C, which is the commitment.
What should you do? That's right. All right. 10Xers, do not fail me. True test. Here it comes.
There's skill, and then there's will. Listen to what I'm saying. There is skill, and then there is will. And here's the interesting thing. I know a lot of people who have a lot of skill, but have no what? Will, right? You ever look at somebody who's successful, and you say, why them, why not you? Yes, okay, that's me too.
You have more control, but your costs are also going to be what? Higher.
Now, here's where some of the magic is starting to kick in.
You can talk to any CEO in the B2B business, any CEO. You walk into his office and they only care about three things. People too. Yeah, you with the suit, put it up. There you go. I hope you can see this. I'll try to draw big. Let's pretend for a moment that I had 7 territories. You remember I wrote that out? Yes or no? Boom. Territory 2, territory 3, all the way to territory number what? 7. So now I've segmented my market.
So content is going to start being created by machines. And I'm telling you right now that those people, you guys, the content creators that connect with people are the ones that are going to win. Some people think, well, it won't work for my industry. Really? It'll work for any industry. Trust me. The majority of the time when we're looking to fix something, repair something, or learn something, where do we go? YouTube. We don't even want to read anymore. We go to YouTube. Tell me if I'm wrong. Tell me if I'm wrong.
When you're doing your thing, beautiful things begin to happen. It's like the law of attraction kicks in. You know what I mean? It's almost like you're in line with the universe. Everything works. And when you do your thing, everybody gets an automatic MBA, which stands for what? Mega Bank Account Money. Are you with me? So we don't want to do a thing. We want to do a what? Beautiful.
All right, put it all together for Victor Antonio. Here we go.
All right, there we go. I'm not here to mess around. You ready to learn, yes or no?
That's how it works in today's market. Whether it's B2B or B2C, you see the similar pattern. How do you just, in other words, say you gotta start doing these things, pushing them, but also encouraging them. Oh, look at this. This is where it gets, dude, this is like so interactive with audiences, Matt. Can you imagine this with your customers? Check this out. Now, what does all this have to do with selling? It has everything to do with selling.
All right, man. I don't know about you, but that intro still hypes me up, man. Welcome to another Sales After Dark, because money never sleeps. All right, man. If you're watching this on the replay, because we're doing this live, if you're watching us replay, you want to fast forward 5 minutes because I got to say hi to my tribe. Then I'll jump into some content for like 10 to 15 minutes, and then we'll do some questions and answers at the end, and we'll sign off on that. So let's see who's in the board. Oh, my man, Chris. This is the gentleman who did the actual intro. Cast ahead. Chris Stone. Thank you, man. Great intro. Love it. You know I love it, man. I'm here for the celebration. I think it's a good place to be. Arvin Garcia, I haven't seen you for a while, man. Thank you. Always wish you the best. Thank you very much. Right back at you, man. Nikki Portera Page. I think I got that totally wrong. Sharing in our Plexus group. Go Plexus. Go Pink. Plexus is a network marketing company. Great people, great management, great product. That's all I can say about them. So, hi right back at you. Sparrow's Tail, you're actually here early, man. You're usually like dropping at the end. You know, you're like, hey, Victor, I barely made it, but I'm glad you're here early, man. Thank you. West Coast in the house. Mia Knox, always a pleasure to have you. Love when you're here. Kenry's here also, man. Thank you, man. I'm doing fine, man. Thank you very much. Lion Rivera, hi from Chicago, hometown. Can't wait for tonight's episode. Should be good. There's my man Chris Stone again. There's skill and then there's will. Why them, not you? Man, skill, will. All right? I love that phrase. Leon Daly, man. From Jamaica, my friend. Irie, man. All good, man. TJ, good day, Master VA, and to all the SAD peeps. That's what I'm talking about right there. All right. Mia, hey, Sparrow. All right, man. Love it, man. Love it. Where's Gator and Pete? I think Pete is right. Boom. Pete Primo right here, man. Cleveland, Ohio, man. Do your thing, man. Who do we have here? We have Jeremy Jamie, Master of Ceremonies of the Grammy Awards and Hollywood Oscars. Man, from your lips to God's ear, man. Maybe one day. Let me see. What do we got here? Mariana Torres. Hey, good to see you. Hope you're doing well. Long time. Doing your thing in Florida. My son's down there, so yeah, man, I hear you. I sell kitchens. Any help? Phoenix Empire. I love it. We'll do our best, man. We'll do our best. Let me see. What's new this week, Victor? Let me see. What's new? CF, you always ask me what's new this week. Well, I guess today's Sunday, so this coming week we got some more interviews for the Sales Influence podcast. Got some good stuff coming down the pipe. Super excited about the interviews. Trish Caples, Tierney, ready to grow, ready to go. Let's do this, man. I love it. Cheryl, what's happening? Cheryl Cham, so great to catching you live, BA. Yep. Love your intro, man. Give Chris Stone a high five for that. There he is again. Hugs from Cheryl Dolan. Right back at you. Giving it right back. All right. TJ, all right. You guys here? Goat Braves. Cool. Let me see. Phoenix Empire. Big love from the UK, by the way. Oh, across the pond, man. Hey, man, it's kind of late over there, right? It's about... Dude, it's like 2 in the morning over there, Phoenix Empire. I love it, man. Tarun, what's happening from India? Hey, did you see my rankings on the Sales Influence podcast in India? Going up, man. If you look at the Sales Influence podcast, India numbers are going up. I think I made it in the top 20 now, so in India, under entrepreneurship. So check it out. So thank you for the support. India, Wolfgang Jilka. That's just a badass name. Wolfgang Jilka. Greetings from Monterey, California. I am currently reading Habits, 5 of the 7 Habits of Highly Successful People. Seek first to understand, then be understood. Great timing. You got it, man. That's still a great book, right? It doesn't matter. That book is like, 30 years old, Wolfgang? And it's still a great book. All right, what do we have here? Hey, Victor, what CRM do you recommend? Angel, there's a lot of good CRMs. Like, I'm a fan of Pipedrive, but there's a lot of good CRMs out there depending on what you need it for. But if it's for you, the individual, you yourself, may I suggest you start with Pipedrive. I love them, man. They're good. Like I said, and it's not expensive, reasonable, and I think it's a good company. Hi, this is Phil from Detroit. My first time beauty for some sales nuts. Phil, thank you for joining us, man. It is, in the words, full force, the place to be. I don't know, but this is what let me see what we got here. Victor Ramon Betances. My brother, saludo desde Providence, Rhode Island, man. Hopefully it's staying warm down there. And there he is. Gator, we can now officially start. Gator is in the house from Las Vegas. We can start. All right. So, tonight's topic. Very quick one, but very powerful one. So, you guys know, for those of you who've been following me, by the way, this is episode. Hold on a second. This is like episode 77 out of 100. For those of you who are just joining me for the first time, wondering what's he so excited about, is that I committed to 100 episodes, and this is episode EP077, and I think I started on May 4th. So I made a commitment, 100 episodes. We're getting there, man. I think I don't know what we're going to do when we get to 100. I know it's going to be like, I got to do some type of celebration. If you have any ideas of the type of celebrations I should do online, maybe we'll do a recap. Maybe I'll get Chris Stone to do a recap of all 99 episodes. That would be impossible because you can't jam that much information in a short period of time. But anyway, we'll figure out something. So today, I want to talk about, I'm a fan of a company called Gong.io, all right? By the way, just go to the website, Gong.io. I interviewed the CEO and also I think the Director of Product Management, Chris Orlob. And it's a great company because what they do is they analyze conversations. And I've covered them in past Sales After Dark, but I wanted to highlight them again because they highlighted some data that I wanted to share with you that I think is important. Now again, let me just step back. Gong.io is a conversation platform. They just partnered with Zoom and Microsoft. The big integration's coming, man. And so what they do is they analyze conversations like, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of conversations to figure out what works and what doesn't work. Great data, great information, and it's not theory. It's not anecdotal. It's data. It's what it is. And I was reading this report, and I said, this is really interesting. I think this would be a good topic for tonight, something soft on a Sunday. And what they said is that when they looked at conversations, when they looked at talk-to-listen ratio, so if I can just say the amount of time you talk versus the time you listen, what they found out was very interesting. What they found out that the best of the best spent 45% of the time talking, and the difference, obviously, around 55%, right? And by the way, this was based on, if you can believe this, let me go to a thicker marker here. I need a thicker marker here. If you can believe this, this was based on 25,000 phone calls. 25,000 phone calls. And what they found is the best of the best salespeople spent 45% of the time talking and 55% of the time listening. This is important because conventional sales wisdom has been turned on its head. And that is, we think that, we have to talk a lot to control the conversation. What they found, conversely, is that the average salesperson, let's say the people towards the bottom, middle or the bottom, basically, they were talking 70% of the time and only listening 30% of the time. By the way, the number's like 68, right? I just kind of rounded up just to make it easy to memorize. So the pros are here, and the average folks are here, right? So that's average right there. So what does that tell you? That we have to let the customer talk. The best of the best realize that we have to let the customer talk. So if we now know this, if we believe the data, which there's no reason why we shouldn't believe the data, right? 25,000 calls. It's not like 10 calls, 15, 30 calls. This is not a small sample. That's 25,000 phone calls. Looked at the salespeople who were making these calls, and they realized what the best of the best were doing. And again, 45% of the time. So in other words, they're letting their customers do all the talking. So let's analyze that, because this gets back to listening, because this is what we're really focusing on. How do we become better listeners? I know what you're saying, Victor. People have covered this topic ad nauseum, right? Everybody knows about talk. But let's really understand what listening means and how we can be better at it. Because if we believe this data, then we need to get better at this. We just simply need to get better at that. So in order to get better at something, we have to realize why we can't get better at it. We all have problems, right? You have problems with listening. I have problems with listening. I definitely have problems with listening because I have this ADHD thing going, right? And so I'm always, and so some people are good listeners, some people are okay listeners, some people are great listeners. And I found out, years ago, what the problem is, at least my problem. I'm going to make this personal, like my own therapy right now, right? And that is, I realized that the reason we have a hard time listening is because, did you know that when you look at, this is my attempt at a face, when you look at the talk rate, right? That's kind of a cool, put curly hair, little ear right there. I didn't say I was a great drawer, so, ease up. So when you look at that talking, basically we talk at about 150 to 300 words per minute. That's typically, so if you're from Georgia, you talk right here. If you're from New York, you talk over here, right? Here you go real slow, man, because that's the way things are done, right? If you're in New York, man, you talk real fast, get to the point, I just need to know, right? So that's basically our velocity when we talk. The problem is, that's an ear, by the way, little earring on the bottom. The thing is, we hear, and our brain, I'll say plus our brain, that's our brain, it processes information at about 800 to 900 words per minute. Do you see the problem? Do you see the problem? That people are talking at this velocity, but your brain is processing information at this velocity. That's a problem. That's why we have a hard time. Come on, admit it. You've all been in a conversation, because it's happened to me, where the person's talking and you're like on to the next subject. You're like on to the next question. You're like thinking about dinner or lunch or whatever it may be. It's like you dart off somewhere, right? We mentally do that because it's hard. And I think we have to train ourselves to figure out, how do we slow ourselves down? Because people need to talk. We just showed you data from Gong that basically said listening is what people want you to do. Listen. Have you ever been in a conversation? Hit me with the one if this has ever happened to you. You ever been in a conversation with somebody and like 2 hours go by, 3 hours go by, and you're like, whoa, that was like amazing conversation with somebody. Does that ever happen to you? Tell me, has that ever happened to you? Have you ever had that great conversation? If it has, hit me with a one. Because here's what happened. If there was a third eye watching, looking down on that conversation, here's what they saw. You were doing most of the talking. That's why it was a great conversation. The other person just happened to be a great listener. And when you deal with somebody who's a great listener, you love being around that person because they're a great listener. And you walk out of that conversation, man, it was really cool. You know, I was sitting there talking to Chris, man, and 3 hours went just like that. That's because Victor was doing all the talking, Chris was doing all the listening, and I thought it was a great conversation. That's how we are. And so keep that in mind, that just being, and the thing is, oh, by the way, because it was a great conversation, do you think I would want to get together, let's say in this case, with Chris again and talk to him? Of course, because the rule of association says, I really like that guy. He really listens well. We have a great conversation going back and forth. And so this happens to all of us all the time, right? So how do we get better at listening? Knowing that this is a problem, knowing that we have to listen to get better, what can we do? That's why you're here tonight. Let's talk about what we can do. And I started thinking about, like, how do we listen? And we start with, we got to be good at asking questions. We got to get good. Now, let me just put questions right here. We got to be good at asking questions, right? That's questions, right? And it's interesting because Gong did a study on questions. Same company, Gong did a study on questions. And what they found was something interesting, is that the best salespeople sprinkle their questions throughout the conversation. They sprinkle them throughout. The average salesperson, or those who don't do as well as the top salespeople, front load their conversations with a lot of questions. In other words, they ask a lot of questions at the beginning. But the professionals, the real people who know what they're doing, ask a lot of questions throughout the conversation. So it's not just front loading, because you know what happens when you ask too many questions at the beginning and it's just question, because there's no conversation. It feels like an interrogation. So they found that the best people who ask the best questions spread them out throughout the conversation. So how do we do that? How can we do that? I want to give you, I'm going to call this the listening wheel, right? I made that up, by the way. I'm going to call this the listening wheel, right? And the listening wheel is, you're going to ask a question. Whatever that question is, I'm going to give you like an outline. And I want you to use this. You probably do this already. I'm just here to kind of just highlight. So let's say you ask a question. Let me go for a different color here. Let me go to orange. What the heck? Let me go to orange. Let's say you ask a question, right? The customer, the prospect, begins to talk. And then one of the things I like to do is I like to have them do one of three things. The first thing I like them to do is to repeat whatever they just said, right? And I like to ask it. This is a way of me taking my time. So I ask a question. The customer gives me something, tells me this. I said, can you say that again? I want to make sure I understood you correctly, right? I want to make sure I understood you correctly. Can you say that again? Now, just pause for a moment there. When I just said to you, if you were the prospect, can you say that again? I just want to make sure I understood that correctly. That transmits immediately that I'm listening, right? because I want you to repeat that again. Can you say that again? That was interesting. Can you say that again? By the way, you can find your own word variations here. So that's one way of letting the customer know that you're listening. Ask them to repeat something, which is very powerful, right? The other thing I like to do, and it's real simple, is I like to ask people to expand. After I ask a question, I get an answer. After I ask a question, I get an answer. And then I'll say things like, can you help me understand that more? Can you give me more information about that? Can you help me understand what was your thought process when you made that decision? That's really interesting. Yeah, can you explain that? Because I really want to understand. Notice how I just genuinely want to understand. Curiosity is always powerful when you're asking questions. When you ask people to expand on what they're talking about, that transmits again, I'm listening to you. I'm really listening to you. And by the way, you can bounce between expand. Well, they expand what they're saying, and they'll tell you in more detail, and then you go, can you say that again? Because I really want to make sure I understood what you just said, right? So there's that. The other strategy you can use is, this one is the easy one. This is the parrot, right? The parrot is almost like, parrot is when you paraphrase back what the customer or the prospect just said. So if I understand you, what you're telling me is A, B, C, D. Are you saying that ... is that? And all you're seeking is what? Confirmation. And note what you can do here. You can bounce between all these three in a conversation. What if the challenge was, accept this mental challenge. Next time you're talking to a prospect, by the way, next time you're talking to a prospect, it could even be a friend. I want you to challenge yourself to have that ratio in mind, that you're going to talk 45% of the time. You're going to let them do the majority of talking, whatever that number may be. In fact, challenge yourself to use any one of these three strategies. First of all, the first strategy is to ask question, right? But then use these strategies to keep the conversation going, to let them keep talking. What if that was the game? What if we had a game right now? And the game was, all right, let's see how little I can talk and have 1 hour conversation. Let's see how little I can talk in a 1 hour conversation. And what I would do is I would ask questions. And then when somebody would give me the answer, I said, can you expand on that? I really want to understand that. Can you tell me more? Can you tell me how that came about? Can you tell me why that happened that way? How did that come about? Really? And then repeat. Can you say that again? Because I really want to make sure I understood what you just said. Can you say that again? Really? So that happened. Tell me more about that, because I definitely want to understand. And then, are you saying ... Is that what you're saying? Because that is amazing, right? Now, I'm having fun with you here, but I'm also serious about this. What if this was it? What if you knew in here that by asking questions and letting the customer or the prospect talk about their problems, their issues, I'm joking about it, but let's put it in a business context. I ask a question, Mr. Customer, is that software platform you're currently on something that you're happy with? Said, Victor, no, right now we're having some issues. Well, can you tell me some of the issues you're currently having, right? Expand on it. Can you tell me about the issues that you're currently having? Well, right now we're looking at and they'll say 2 or 3 things, right? And by the way, let's talk about when you're having a conversation, one of the things I learned to do is not interrupt. But what I do is I take notes. Now, what I do is I just write a word or a key phrase. So for example, you ever been in a conversation where somebody says something and your brain just wants to jump in? You got to stop that. You got to pause it. So what I do is I write the key word down. One of the things I'm learning I'm doing a lot of interviews now. For those of you who've been following my Sales Influence podcast, I've been doing a lot of interview with experts and people on the front lines of selling. And what I tell them, you don't know this, but I'm going to tell you now. What I tell them before I start the interview, before I hit the record button, I tell them, I said, look, this is going to be a 90-10 interview. You're going to talk for 90% of the time. I'm going to try to talk for only 10% of the time, because I don't want people to hear me. I want them to hear your thoughts. It could be 90-10, 80-20, but I tell them that. And it's almost like it gives them permission to talk. And if you listen to the Sales Influence podcast, they do all the talking. I just add a question, tell them to expand on something, and just keep nudging them along. And when we're done with the interviews, I get the feeling, I could be wrong, but I think I'm right. I get the feeling they enjoyed the interview because they're doing all the talking. I'm just helping them tell their stories. And I want you to think about it the same way. It doesn't matter whether it's business context or personal context. People want to be heard, so you let them talk. But it's hard. Like I said, we got to train our brain to stop, shut up, and let them talk. So use any of these strategies. The first big strategy is obviously ask good questions. Quality questions drives quality conversations. But ask him, by the way, can you expand on that? Tell me a little more about that. I want to know more about that. And again, as they're expanding, I'm writing down keywords. Why? Because when I come back with another question, I'll look at my keyword and I know what question to ask. Jill, you mentioned when I asked you about the systems you were using, you mentioned something about report generation. Can you tell me more about that? See, I wrote the word report generation. I knew that's an issue. I wrote it down. And then after she tells me, so are you telling me, because I want to make sure I'm clear, are you telling me that these reports will not allow you to ... and you have to consolidate them before you can actually print them out or whatever it may be, display them on your dashboard? Yes. Wow. By the way, can you tell me what you would want in lieu of that? It's conversation, right? And I can sit there and just ask questions, but I'm what? I'm trying to find out what the key problems are. One of the studies that I've seen, and I'm trying to remember who the company was, but on average, they said when you're in the discovery phase of a conversation, the initial conversation, the discovery phase, you should try to identify 3. 3 seems to be the magic number. 3 key areas or 3 key problems that the customer's having. If you identify less than 3, it's not good enough to position your value. If it's more than 3, it just seems a little bit overwhelming, like we have too many problems. So 3 seems to be the magic number. So keep this in mind. So as you're doing this conversation, again, try to keep the conversation going. Now let me give you some warnings, and then I'll wrap up and then I'll take some questions. Now, let me give you some don'ts. Things you don't do in a conversation, because as I just showed you, one of the things we want to do here is we want to keep the conversation what? Just going. We want to keep the conversation going using any of these strategies. We want to keep the conversation. Question, use any of these strategies to keep the wheel of listening going, right? Keep it going. So here are some don'ts. Here are some don't do this, because if you do, if you can imagine a wheel like a flywheel, if you do this, it'll just stop it. And the conversation will just die. People always ask me, Victor, how can I become a great conversationalist? Victor, how can I talk to customers? How can I, get into that flow? The first part I just mentioned with the listening wheel is the big advantage, right? But here's where people make mistakes. And I think this is where a lot of breaks. Think of these, what I'm about to show you, as little breaks. Like you're pumping the brakes on a conversation, which you shouldn't do. The first one is, 1, don't step on them. Don't step on it. Do you know what I mean by don't step on it? Somebody's talking and you don't let them finish and you step on their conversation before they finish their thought. Do that a couple of times to somebody, especially a customer or a prospect, they'll start to shut down because you keep interrupting them. So don't step on their conversation. I know in your mind you want to get something out. And I'm telling you, the best strategy I've found when I just want to get something out, but the person's still talking, is I write down the key word so I don't forget it. Okay? So don't step on the conversation. That's number 1. Number 2, don't answer quickly. Now this may seem, don't answer quickly. This one might seem counterintuitive, but don't answer quickly. What do I mean by that? When the customer's talking to you and the customer just dropped some heavy information on you, well, right now, what we're looking at is a decline in our revenue structures, and we realize that we need to strategize and operational market, go-to strategy, blah, blah, whatever they're saying. And if you just insert something too quick, guess what happens? It doesn't allow that power. But what if the customer says something and you just take it in? And then you answer thoughtfully and purposefully. Too often we think we have to fill that silence. The best salespeople, I am telling you, the best salespeople love silence. They embrace the void, man. They love the silence. They don't care because it doesn't bother them, because that silence is a moment of reflection. In fact, other studies have shown that if you just leave a little bit of silence in there and you nod your head, it indicates to the customer to keep talking, the prospect, and just doing that, pause with a head nod, gives you about 25% more information. So you're getting the customer to give you more information by allowing silence and doing a nod. But in this case, by waiting to answer, by really thinking about the answer, because when people give me an answer too quickly, I'm like, did you even think about it? But when you take the time to pause, here's what I think. You know what I mean? It just allows that, it has that authoritative heaviness to it, which is what you want. So again, it's an easy strategy. So don't be too quick to answer. Young salespeople do this all the time. Well, how do I know this? Because I used to do it. I used to think I used to have to answer quickly because then I wanted to think I was smart and I was brilliant and I was quick on my feet and I was fast. No, as you get older, you get more sage-like and you realize that it isn't about speed to answer. It's about speed to wisdom. And then it's okay to slow down and just give them the answer slowly. Drop your voice if you want, just like that too, by the way. All right, number three. Number three, don't. This was an easy one. Please don't finish their line. You ever have somebody finish your line for you? I hate that. I hate when somebody finishes my line. Even if you know where the customer is going, even if you know where the prospect is going, don't finish their line. You may think you're clever, like, see, I knew where you were going. No, it doesn't help you. You don't get any brownie points for knowing that. The customer doesn't say, oh, he knew where I was going. He's so great. No, they're like, you could have just let me finish. And all of a sudden, there's that sense of rudeness when you're trying to do that. So don't do that, okay? If you're doing that, don't do that. And by the way, at the end, I'm going to do 5 of these. You're going to tell me which one you commit the most, okay? You commit the most. Number 4, it's kind of close. Never use this phrase. Never use this phrase. Never use that phrase. Yeah, I knew that. No, I knew that already. Yeah, I heard that. Never do that to a customer. Never do that to a lead. Never do that to anybody, really, because as soon as you say, I knew that, I mean, you might be able to get away with one of those, but you do that 2 or 3 times, they're going to think you're a know-it-all. Even if somebody says something, you could say something like this, yeah, I heard something about that. That's my way of kind of making it gentle. Yeah, I heard something about that. I'm somewhat familiar with that. And then what I do is I turn around. Yeah, I think I heard something about it. Is that the issue where da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da? The customer goes, yeah. See, I just turned that into a connection moment as opposed to, I knew that, I trumped you moment, right? The one-upsmanship, because that's what that comes across as. But if you say, I think I heard something like that, and then you ask the clarification question, is that the report on da-da-da-da-da on why certain CRMs, da-da-da-da, certain platforms are doing this? And he says, yeah. And then, again, you can expand that conversation. What did you think of that article? What were your big takeaways when you read that article? Again, these are moments to engage, especially when you knew something already. Turn it into a moment of engagement. And I think the last one is, this is the one I hear, and I think I hear this from, I don't hear this one often, but when I do, it just irritates me, is somebody goes, it's almost like this one right here. I knew that. They go, yeah. People go, yeah. They go, yeah. And I go, yeah. And it's almost like they do this with their head. Have you ever seen that one? Yeah. And it's almost like, hurry up, shut up. I need to talk. Yeah. Hurry up, shut up. I need to talk. All right, so now let me ask you a question so we can wrap this up. Out of the 5, which one do you think you're most guilty of? Which one do you think you're guilty of? Stepping on somebody's conversation. Basically, you don't let them finish, right? Number 2, you answer too quickly. Number 3, you don't let them finish the line. Number 4, I knew that, right? Or this one. Yeah. No, yeah. Which one? Come on, give me some. And that's what I wanted to share with you tonight. I think it's, like I said, I think this is really fascinating when you look at the studies that are going out there about listening, and it's really hard, man. It's funny. I mean, you can Google all these, like a bunch of TED Talks just on listening. And if it's something that's so easy, why is it that we have a hard time? I go back to this. This to me was, my aha moment was this back here. That was my aha moment. When I realized that we talk at this velocity right here, but our brain is processing information much quicker. In other words, the input is slower than the processing speed, which makes it that much harder to listen to somebody. And so we all have this issue. So we have to find ways to mentally slow down. For me, again, I'll highlight this. When I do interviews, I'm talking to somebody, I just write down keywords and key phrases. because that tells me I can look at my notes, I can just glance at them, and I don't lose my place. Sometimes we want to say something because we don't want to forget it. It's like we have a short attention buffer, right? There's only so much information we can keep up there, and we're afraid that we might forget it, so we need to feel like interrupt somebody just to say it. And I'm saying to you is, that's the moment you take notes. And by the way, we know that note-taking is really a sign that you're listening to people, right? All right, let me see. A lot of people say number 2. Man, a lot of number 2s here. Let me see what number 2 is. So you answer too quickly, number 2. Scott says number 2, Tarun 2. Mike, definitely stepping out. 1. Leon says 1. Mike K says, I'm guilty of doing them all. I love that. That is honest, man. That is honest. I know I missed some comments up here, man. I'm going to go to the top. Oh, man. By the way, so I got to tell you, let me just go to blank, because I got to bring this guy, Brandon. So I'm doing an interview with this guy right here, that guy right there. Look him up. He runs a little small company called Seamless.ai. So if you go to a company called Seamless.ai, go check out what they're doing. Go check. This is the boss man himself. But I am going to talk to Brandon. I think it's this week or next week on the Sales Influence podcast. It is going to be a great interview. So again, check out the Sales Influence podcast. Doesn't matter where you find it, but find it, because some of the interviews I'm putting up are with folks like Brandon, people who are at the front lines, really developing technology to help us sell more effectively. So I cannot wait to have that conversation with you, man. It's going to be great, man. It's going to be great. All right, so let me see who else. I got TJ. I want to be like Pete and Master V. Hey, that's cool. Again, no one wants to be ran over, right? Guzman says 100%. Sometimes it's not even intentional. Yeah, right? It's just like it's not. It's almost like you just do it. And it's like, again, we're all guilty of this, man. So I think we're like a work in progress, right? We're just trying to get better. Let me see. I know I missed a lot of comments. I'm going to go down to the numbers. So a lot of 1s, a lot of 2s. TJ says, I used to be 1 and 3. I'm guilty of all. That was Mike already. Mike K says, what does he say? But I like solutions. This is a great topic. Heather says, number 1. I hear you, Heather. I hear you. Dwight says, with all these AI platforms, do you think the human salesperson is soon to be gone? Dwight, we had this conversation on the last Sales After Dark. And I think the short answer is, when you look at the complexity spectrum, simple sale to a complex sale, as you move towards the complexity side, that's where the salespeople are safe, right? From the simple standpoint, like a simple B2C product, I definitely think you're going to see that. You're going to see a lot of sales jobs go away or being displaced. But again, in some cases, they're going to disappear, but in some cases, they may transform into something else. In other words, people who used to be account executives used to have to go out and meet somebody, may come inside salespeople, and they can work with the platforms and do demos and presentations, via the computer. So I think there's a lot of changes happening. So there's going to be some elimination, but there's also going to be some displacement, like jobs are going to be shifted over, and then there's going to be some transformation. The job is not going to look like what we're accustomed to looking like. So I don't know. That's my short answer to that one. That's a tough one. My man Doug says, good listening, Sales Influence Podcast. Thank you, Doug. Appreciate that. Sajid Ali says, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, you're asking me? Stepping on people's conversation is my big weakness right now. So I'm with you. I got to admit, I'm with you. Thanks, Victor. You keep me awake at 2:30 a.m. here in England, man. Thank you, Dennis. Appreciate you being here, man. Cup of tea's in the house. I'm humming. When people are talking, it's an issue. I got it. Thank you, Pete, on the Sales Velocity Academy. Start the week by getting the Sales Velocity Academy. It rocks. Thank you, man. Spencer Riley says, let me see. What does Spencer say? I missed you here, Spencer. Was it, in today's world, been using my mute button while they talk helps my control. Interesting, right? That could be. It's interesting, man. I like that. Let me see. 4 and 5. I say, yeah. I know that. Yeah. Okay, you just combine them. Yeah. I know that. Yeah. I know that. And it annoys me than the other side. Yeah, I do. Again, I'm guilty of that one too, man. I'm working on it. I'm working on myself, man. Trish, Caples, Tierney again. I find this hard to do while on Zoom or Teams. It can even happen unintentionally due to the delay of connection. That's a good point, Trish, because it's like when you got bad connections, I'm really discovering that the downside of these Zoom connections when you have multiple people on there is that some people have horrible connections, right? And then there's that delay, and then people are stepping all over each other's conversation, and you lose this flow, right, Trish? It's like you lose this flow, this momentum, and it just really makes it hard. I sell tires. Any tips on people trusting me when they actually need them? Hey, Brock, one of the things I always say, to me, I've come up with this formula for trust. You tell me if you like it, like to hear back from you. To me, everybody says the word trust, and I go, but what does that mean? And so I've come up with my own equation for trust. One, there's just two components here. The first one is you got to take the customer's point of view. In other words, try to understand their situation. It could be they have a lot of money, they don't have a lot of money. They have an old car, they have a new car. It's an investment, it's not an investment. Really try to take their point of view. And then I always say plus, and this is have their best interest in mind, the BIM. And let them know that you're not trying to stick their head in their pocket, right? And so if I was selling tires, one of the things I would do is I would always offer people 2 to 3 options and let them choose. Because people like to be empowered to make a decision, right? So when you let somebody know, hey, look, here are 3 options, A, B, or C, right? Or maybe 3 different brands, right? Here's this, here's a Firestone, here's a Goodyear, here's a blah, 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 right? And then you say, if it were mine to do, I would go with this one. And look at my last Sales After Dark. I really get into this. I would do this one, here's why, right? And I talk about here's why, and that gives it more power. So check out the last, I think it's episode 76, the one before this, and there's some great tips in there. If you combine it with this, you're gonna be awesome. Let me know what you think of that, Brock. Definitely a great topic. Thank you, Heather. It never gets old, right? Because we have to keep reminding ourselves just to actually, slow down. But I think for me, what's been working, Heather, is writing down in a conversation, writing down a key word. And then I can just glance at it and remember to ask whatever I was going to ask. And it seems to help. All right, what do we got? Scott, do you think it's important? To acknowledge that a customer is right, which will build rapport, especially when a husband is explaining to his wife? Well, why isn't the wife explaining it to the husband, Scott? Maybe that could be the case too. Do you think it's important to acknowledge that a customer is right, which will build rapport? Let's answer that first part. Of course, it really, remember, what holds a customer back from making a buying decision is that they don't feel good about what they know. It's not what they know, it's how they feel about what they know. And when you let a customer know, says, you're right on that one. On that, you're definitely right. That right there also makes sense. You're like the expert. You're confirming, because that's what they're looking for. You're confirming that's what they're looking for. And they're also looking for clarification, which is like, that's correct, but let's put it in its proper context. If you were to do this, this, and this, you would be absolutely right. But keep in mind that if you have A, B, C, then that might be an issue. That's when you position yourself as an expert. So you're saying you're right, but you're positioning yourself as an expert. Now, let's take it with a couples dynamic, because you don't want to be on either side, right? You're like Switzerland. You're right in the middle. You're neutral. And so what I typically do is I acknowledge the person who's right? What you're saying is absolutely correct. I said, but as your wife or husband has pointed out, this one thing right here might be a concern if A, B, C. So in other words, you're saying you're both right. It's just context. And if you think about it, Scott, many of our miscommunications are context-based, right? If we just define the context, people go, oh yeah, well, okay, if that's the context, yeah, you're right. I agree with you. So I would always make sure that you're always define definitions and always lay out the context. By definition, I said, when you say it's wet, right? Do you mean like rain wet, or is it just moist type of thing, right? Is it just damp, right? Let's just define what we mean. So when you say in the roof, the roof is, leaking, and when you say leak, are we talking slow leak, or are we talking a large leak, right? So you just start defining things, and then you start putting things in context. That's when I think you bring everybody onto a common playing field. So try to get everybody on the same side. Sorry, that was a long answer for that one, but it was a good question. Let me see. Sparrow's Tail says, I actually had a great conversation with one of our best customers yesterday, all because I shut up and let them tell their story. My vices are 1 and 2, but I'm working on it, man. Hey, dude, I hear you, man. Kenry says, 1, he's confessing. Kenry, first step to recovery is admitting you have a problem, man. You're on your way, right? Let me see. I just realized practice what to ask or say is easy, but practice how to listen is tough every time, man. Thank you, man. Thank you, guys. Hubby wants to show how much he knows. Yeah, well, hubby always wants to show how much he knows, but remember, when it comes to the housing, I don't mean, it's in many cases, depending on the situation, the context, you got to get them both on the same, on the same page. Because if one feels like you're taking sides, then, I think you just don't put yourself in a good situation. Tonight, I'm implementing what you are teaching, Victor. Listening, great stuff. Thank you. Thanks for completing our Monday, Sunday Master VA. You rock. All right, I'm going to close out with the last one here from G. Fallon. Hi, Victor. I'm afraid I'll feel unnatural when using some of that techniques, which, by the way, are great. Would you give us a piece of advice on how not to feel unnatural when applying them? Oh, that's an interesting one. How not to feel unnatural. I think you may be feeling unnatural because, you think you have to talk. Somewhere in your brain is telling you need to talk, but you really don't. And so I don't know which part makes you feel, uneasy, but if I'm asking questions, I think that's a great salesperson, right? If I'm asking you to clarify something, that means I really care. I mean, the mindset should be, G. Fallon, is that you really care about the conversation. If you really care about the conversation, then doing that stuff becomes very natural. Asking questions because you care is very natural. Asking somebody to repeat something because you really want to understand is very natural. And when you say something to somebody, can you explain that? Because I don't think I understand. Can you just kind of explain that just a little more? Expand on that, right? That's because you care. And then you demonstrate understanding. I say, are you saying that this is that and that's that? Is that what you're saying? And again, what you're transmitting, I think you're looking at your own brain. You're kind of looking at yourself when you should be looking at what it does for your customers. And it lets the customer know, G. Fallon, that you really care, that you're really listening. So that's why it's important. These are not tactics or tricks to trick the customer. This is just ways for you to remember what type of conversation, how do I structure a conversation so I can have a great conversation? And asking questions, asking people to expand, repeat certain things, and then you parrot back certain things to make sure you understand is a very natural way of doing it. The pause might be something you have to get used to, right? The pause is the tricky part. Getting used to silence is tricky, right? But again, it takes practice. That's all it does. All right. Love this format. Scott says, thank you, man. Appreciate that. Let me see. Leon. Exactly, Victor. Listen, ask, and ask questions, then ask for clarification. Just that simple, right? And it just takes a little bit of training of the brain, man. Dwight says, thank you. And let me just close out with some final thoughts, man. By the way, Sales Velocity Academy, great courses. I think I have one, the one in the Sales Velocity Academy, there's one on sales conversations. I know that's one of the good ones I have. So check out the courses there, man. That's a great course. If you're in there already, if you're not in there, you should think about becoming part of the Sales Velocity Academy. All right, so final thoughts for this evening. So I gave you a simple structure. I think the Gong.io data is pretty interesting, right? The best of the best salespeople listen more than they talk, right? Listen more than they talk. That was the big takeaway. The second big takeaway is that they sprinkle questions throughout the conversation. They don't front load them. In other words, they don't ask all the questions up front because it seems like an interrogation, not a conversation. If you think about it, it kind of makes sense, right? If you're just asking a lot of questions, it seems like, okay, you're just interrogating me. But if I'm asking questions as I'm going through the conversation, it has a more natural flow to that conversation. So knowing that you should listen more, talk less, knowing that you should sprinkle your questions throughout is even better, right? By the way, before I forget, if you really like this, hit the subscribe button and do me a favor. Can you share this stream with at least one person? That's the only favor I ask for the evening. And if you like it, or share it. Yeah, one of those two. There you go. And then but let's go through the model. One is that you ask questions. And if you ask questions, just remember, it's very simple. Let's think of the acronym REP, R-E-P. One, ask them to repeat, right? Can you go say that again? Because I want to make sure I heard you right? Can you say that again? Then there's expand, right? R-E, expand. Can you help me understand that? Can you, explain that a little more in detail? Can you show me how you got there? Can you guys, talk about what was your thought process? Again, find your natural language/voice when asking these questions. Don't use my words. Use yours, whatever sounds natural. And the P, R-E-P, repeat, expand, or P for parrot. So what you're saying is, if I understand you correctly, what you're saying is this. So when that happened, you're telling me that this is what you're going to do. And all you're doing is confirming with them. And again, if you think about this strategy, it's really powerful because it's letting the customer know that you really care about what they're saying. And if you kind of have that here connected to here, brain and heart, right? If you let them know that you care, you're asking questions because you care, then it becomes a natural conversation. It doesn't have to be forced. That's the beauty of this, that when you use this, it becomes part of your speaking DNA, it becomes very natural. And you don't even have to worry about, when you're going to ask a question, how you're going to ask it. You just simply do. And on that note, I am signing off. Again, thank you for joining me on the Sales After Dark, because money never sleeps. This is Victor Antonio signing off, always reminding you, selling ain't hard.